Hi, it's Leela, the proud Poly Kinky Queer Slut. Today's question is, what is a fluid bonded partner? Fluid bonding is something that we talk about in terms of safer sex. So this is very much about, sexual relationships. We all need to make different choices that are appropriate for our risk profile when it comes to safer sex and what choices we make around protection. So when it comes to fluid bonding, it's a term that generally means people you have sex without a condom with. So the people that you have sex with, where seminal fluids go into the body, one orifice or another, or both, or all. Some people interpret fluid bonding to also mean oral sex, so that's something that's important to talk about when it comes to definitions. And a lot of people have different risk tolerances when it comes to oral sex than when it comes to vaginal or anal sex. So it is important to talk about, like, what does fluid bonding mean to you? Some people see fluid bonding as a particularly emotional thing. Others, it's just a practical thing. I think that a lot of times when we have those like ongoing romantic relationships, it makes more sense for us personally to not worry about STI protection with those individuals. Also, you generally would become fluid bonded with somebody that you understand their risk profiles and share an understanding of their risks and have a certain amount of trust with regard to what they're doing. So you can absolutely have sex with people whose STI safety practices you don't know and understand, but and where you don't trust that they're telling you everything, or where you don't even ask. But in those cases, like a lot of us, including myself, choose to use more protections with those people. So for example, maybe more hands and less mouth, maybe more, gloves or condoms or dental dams, if we're not going to ask the question. So if you're going to just meet some hot thing at the club and have a one night stand, then your level of protection is going to be different than if it's somebody that you have an ongoing connection with for a long period of time. For me personally, I would love to hear people's recommendations about what oral sex, safe sex works for them. Because I've found that to be just challenging. I mean, you can put a condom on a penis and that works pretty well. But in terms of like girl oral sex, or anything having to do with the vulva and oral sex, dental dams don't really work for me. And I'm curious what you all find. Frankly, in my group, in my little community and my personal level of tolerances, I don't worry too much about safer sex with oral sex, because I'm aware of my risks. I get tested frequently. I know what the common concerns are, and I find it's okay for my risk profile. But when it comes to vaginal sex, my risks are much greater. So I'm very, very militant about always having the condom on whatever goes inside, and I think that a lot of that seems to be kind of the norm in my culture, but each cultural group will have slightly different norms around these things. And it is important to have specific conversations about what your risks are and what you're doing to mitigate the risks, and to make sure that you're comfortable with those risks, because STIs are scary and it's legitimate for people to be afraid of disease. It's maybe a little overblown, and I do think that the STI scares, especially of the late 20th century, were harmful for a lot of us, but also those scares were because there was a real life epidemic going on. So it's a give and take. People are justified in having a lot of different opinions about this. I will say it is a betrayal to lie to a partner about your safer sex practices. And I know people personally who have had relationships end because of a partner deciding to lie about their risk factors because they just wanted to do a sexual practice that was not consistent with the agreements they had with their other partners. So in those cases, people chose to enforce their boundaries by dissolving relationships because of that trust. So this is not something to take lightly. If you've got a relationship with somebody where you're agreeing not to use certain kinds of protection and to take greater risk with each other, that's because of a trust. And it's important to maintain that view. And also to remember that these things can be renegotiated. Like thinking about this particular situation with this friend who dissolved a relationship because of of a violation of this particular boundary. If that partner had approached and said, hey, I'd really like to have unprotected sex with this other person, then there could have been discussions about testing practices, about yeah, I feel okay with that if everybody's getting tested, and or an opportunity to have a nuanced discussion about that. Problems tend to pop up when people don't talk about stuff. So I really encourage you to just talk to your partners about it. And then also just, do what makes sense for you. And for you, if it's your personal risk profile that you're just never going to use condoms, that's fine. Do that. But then make sure that you're telling your partners that that's what you're doing. And also, if you're approaching somebody for sex and you are a person who always uses protection and somebody's asking you on like a first or second date to not use protection, well, have that conversation and make sure you're understanding that that's probably not an aberration just because of you. It's probably a practice this person has, and that's something to talk about. That's something to be aware of and to factor into your risk profile. And again, for me personally, that wouldn't mean that I don't play with that person. It would mean that I would mitigate how we interact and use the precautions that feel good for me in that situation. Whereas with somebody else with different practices, I might use a different set of precautions. So anyway, I went a little bit of field of fluid bonded partner, but but that's how I approach fluid bonded partners and some of the pitfalls and also advantages of that. I will say it is nice having a fluid bonded partner because unprotected sex feels good. There's something special about that particular feeling that I like. And so, yeah, I think that there is definitely a lot of legitimacy and value in making that choice to not use that kind of protection with some partners. It is very much a personal choice, but yeah, just be respectful and honest about it, and don't make assumptions. Ask questions instead of making assumptions. That's my advice. Because whenever I've seen things go wrong, it's because people are making assumptions instead of asking questions. So thanks very much for listening. This is Leela, the proud Poly Kinky Queer Slut. You can ask me anything by emailing me at kinkyqueerslut@gmail.com. Thanks very much and have a great day.